Welcome to this week's edition of World Crisis Radio. This is Webster Tarpley reporting from Washington, D.C. Now, we have the big event finally here. The book about Bishop Romney is now on its way to the printer. The manuscript has been finalized. Sorry this took longer than predicted, but we had to keep up with breaking news, including the Time magazine cover story on the Mormon identity, which some of you were kind enough to call to my attention. Thank you for that. Thank you for all the correspondence I get. Often I can't respond to all of it, but much of it is highly appreciated. The book entitled Just Too Weird, Bishop Romney's Mormon Takeover of America. Just Too Weird, Bishop Romney's Mormon Takeover of America, from Progressive Press. Now, I regard this as a matter of some urgency that this begin to circulate and have the maximum impact obtainable on public opinion at home and abroad even. So therefore, I am appealing to all of the listeners of the show, people who have supported my work, sympathetic or interest or whatever it is. Please come forward now, buy this book. Go to Progressive Press of California. Progressive Press, I guess it's progressivepress.com. We'll check that during one of the breaks. But you dial it up right in the Yahoo or Google or whatever you have. Bing. Progressive Press of California, and it's called Just Too Weird, Bishop Romney's Mormon Takeover of America, Polygamy, Theocracy, and Subversion. Buy a copy right away. It's going to be available on pay for print on demand. So there'll be copies. You got to think now, looking towards the elections. The proper attitude towards these elections is to be opposed to both candidates and to support the United Front Against Austerity meeting in New York City on October 27th. We'll talk a lot more about that. But the proper attitude is to see the absolute bankruptcy of both candidates. And we've seen it again with the debate this week, as we'll outline in just a minute. I've got 2 books out about Obama. If you find people that have illusions about Obama, buy them those books. Obama, the Postmodern Coup, The Making of a Manchurian Candidate, Barack H. Obama, The Unauthorized Biography. That's the whole story of Obama. I think almost nothing has been added by all the Johnny-come-latelys, right? People who come out with the anti-Obama literature the second time around are highly suspect, or at least they're suspect of being very much in a tardy state. But the question now of Romney and the ability to explain what Romney does is rooted in the historical profile of the Mormon Church. This will be the subject of a couple of segments today. What happened in that debate, what Romney does in general, this Time magazine profile. It is rooted in the history of Mormonism, above all the question of duplicity, deception, antinomianism, the idea that the moral law does not apply to the saints. And, of course, Romney is a saint. He's a latter-day saint, and he's one of the top ones. This cannot be understood, and the effortless ease of lying, the effortless ease of deception and dissembling and prevarication by Romney, it makes him one of the most accomplished liars. People have talked about Romney as a flip-flopper. Well, what does that mean? Flip-flopping means lying. I believe this now. I always have. We'll give you some historical examples. Rooted in Mormonism, therefore you've got to consult the relevant historical record, and I give it to you all in one place. The Joseph Smith story, the question of the secession of Utah territory, which is just off the charts, right? Can't be done by any stretch of the imagination. 1857 to 1858, with the Mountain Meadows Massacre, which seems to be the glue that holds together a significant part of the Romney machine today, with people like Senator Lee and Governor Leavitt and others. And then, of course, Brigham Young's waiting game during the Civil War, when he was awaiting the opportunity to stab the United States in the back. If the British had attacked through Canada, if the French had attacked through Mexico, Brigham Young would have been there stabbing the United States in the back. So there it is, duplicity, treachery, subversion. And the hyper-patriotic rhetoric of Romney, his books, and all this stuff cannot hide decades and decades, practically a century, of open rebellion, subversion, scorn for the laws of the United States, above all polygamy, the racism, the misogynism, and all the rest of this. This has got to be put forward. The Democratic Party is too weak. Other people lack the necessary historical depth. So here it is for you. Just too weird. Bishop Romney's Mormon takeover of America, polygamy, theocracy, subversion. Go right now to Progressive Press. Buy a copy. Now, think about people. If you have people who have illusions about Romney, we've just done Obama, so now let's go on to Romney. People who think that Romney is a fine man need to read this book. People who don't know the story of polygamy need to read this book. Remember, the Romney family chose polygamy over patriotism. When they had a choice between the United States on the one hand and polygamy on the other, they chose polygamy. They went to Mexico. They had no plans to come back. They were forced to come back by Pancho Villa and his revolutionary forces. Otherwise, they would have been in Mexico. We would have been, I guess, better off, right? There'd be no Romneys back here in the United States. They'd be down in Mexico. And the reason was that the anti-polygamy campaign in Mexico was attenuated. It wasn't as vigorous as the one going on in post-Civil War America. Then there's the little matter of racism that the Time magazine manages to sweep under the covers, under the carpet completely. And we'll go through the timeline on that. But the basic idea is up until 1978, if you were black, you could not be a full member of the Mormon Church. You could not come to the priesthood, and the priesthood is a fairly low grade. I would think that the possible comparison would be confirmation in Christianity, right? Something that might happen to you when you're an adolescent, more or less, or an early adolescent. That is essentially getting to the priesthood in Mormonism. Maybe the comparison is not one-to-one, but you get the idea. So you can't really become a full-fledged Mormon if you're black until 1978. And that means that until 30 years ago, one-third of a century ago, if you were a racist and you were looking for a lily-white congregation with no black faces, the one church that could guarantee you that was Mormonism. So this meant that the Mormon church became loaded with racists and reactionaries more than it had been. I think the time between 1964 and 1978 is when they had a tremendous influx of racists and reactionaries. Now, of course, the Mia Love exercise is designed to hide that, but we're not going to be fooled. That is tokenism in the worst form. So women, of course, are not going to be interested in polygamy. I hope nobody would be interested in polygamy, but unfortunately it turns out some are. But certainly women faced by this are horrified, and that is deeply rooted. According to my understanding, the last prophet, the last boss, top president of the Mormon Church, who lived in polygamy, died in 1945. I think it's Heber Grant. He had polygamous marriages that had been contracted before the ban or shortly after the ban in 1890. So there he was. Polygamy is simply there. And we have these quotes from Senator Hatch, the Mormon, from Senator Lee, the Mormon, and from Romney, that polygamy is probably covered by religious freedom. I'm sorry, it's not. The twin relics of barbarism, polygamy and slavery, have no place in the United States. Back in a minute. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C. Once again, my new book-length study. It's about 250 to 260 pages. Just Too Weird. Bishop Romney's Mormon Takeover of America, Polygamy, Theocracy, Subversion. Go to Progressive Press. Progressive Press. You can get it on Progressive Press right now, faster than any other way. It's progressivepress.com, progressivepress.com. Just Too Weird. Order copies now. They are available. This will be shipping next week. That is to say, it's the 5th of October right now. So the copies will begin going out next week, starting around Columbus Day. The week of Columbus Day will be the time for this to hit the street. So think about people that you want to educate about the historical reality of what Romney represents, because this has hardly been touched. And I'm afraid the Time magazine cover raised the question but didn't really provide any answers. Now let's look, illustrate what I'm talking about. Why is this book so essential? Let's look at this debate that we've just had. First of all, the debate is a farce, as I tried to argue on the Twitter feed. The farce is one thing. The theater that you get to see is one thing. The reality, which we'll get to in a minute, is that the austerity ghouls are at work. The Crapo Commission, gosh, another Mormon, another ally of Romney, is one of the dominant people on this commission. Senator Mike Crapo of Idaho. Crapo, Chambliss, the scoundrel, Coburn, the reactionary, Alexander, the prison industrial complex man, Warner of Virginia, Durbin, the what can we say, the Illinois bipartisan combine, Bennett, Democrat of Colorado, Conrad of North Dakota, I guess it is, and a couple of more. They are essentially planning ways to skin you alive with killer austerity. It's the Halloween season. The austerity ghouls are at work. So while the poor public is fixated on the debate between Romney and Obama, the austerity ghouls are at work behind the scenes. But let's just look at the farce, right? Because we've got to account for the behavior of Romney, and it shows the problem that we've got. So what we have in this debate, the Romney-Obama debate, a liar and a coward. Romney, the liar. Obama, the coward. Romney was lying a blue streak. It was breathtaking. In the first 15 minutes of that debate, he basically reinvented himself. It was a different person. Was it an imposter? Completely different. $5 trillion tax cut for the rich? What? Me? No. I'll never have a $5 trillion tax cut for the rich. What? Soak the middle class? Gouge them to pay for tax cuts for the rich? No, I wouldn't do that. So, Romney, what is he? He's a shapeshifter. He's the artful dodger. He's Proteus. He takes any form he wants. He's Romney the liar. Now, everybody knows that he's a flip-flopper. Flip-flopper means you're a liar. You say, I never believed that. I've always believed what I'm telling you right now today. Gordon Gekko, the zinger king, but the shapeshifter, the artful dodger, Romney the liar, king of the flip-floppers. He's raised flip-flopping to a high art. The interesting thing about Romney, though, is how can he lie with such aplomb? How can it be so smooth, so effortless, so lacking in friction? There's no conscience. There are no qualms. The man is an antinomian, an antinomian. He believes that the moral law, any kind, 10 Commandments, whatever you want, does not apply to him. Where does this come from? It comes from Mormon theology. It's deeply rooted. Read this book, Just Too Weird, Bishop Romney's Mormon Takeover of America. You will find that not only was Joseph Smith an antinomian in the sense that he did not believe that any 10 Commandments applied to him, but his mother was an antinomian. She believed in the primacy of one's own personal religious experience, and that trumps all the law and the prophets, the 10 Commandments, whatever it is, the public code, doesn't matter. You have to live out what the inner voice is telling you. Now, just in terms of the situating antinomianism, it's in Christianity, of course, it's a heresy to say that the end is near, we can do what we want, or I'm a saint, I'm saved, I can do what I want. There are forms of Calvinism that get very close to this idea. I know that I am saved, and therefore whatever I do is going to be okay. No. Another one is, once the end time is imminent, that means the moral law is suspended. No, no, no. The denomination that took this further, perhaps in the 1600s in England, was the Quakers. The early Quakers, the pre-clampdown Quakers, said, well, you have an inner voice, you have extra scriptural revelation that's given to you. Doesn't matter what the Ten Commandments say about killing, stealing, adultery, and all the rest. You can do what you want. If God tells you that it's not a sin for you, go ahead and do it. Now, of course, the voice that you're hearing is probably not that of coming from on high, but from some other place. So you're getting these messages saying, go ahead and do it, go for it, and this is inherently unreliable. The solution that the Quakers had to this was to de-emphasize the inner light and to counterpose the sense of the meeting. In other words, the elders. The elders run the meeting, and you have to conform to the consensus of the meeting. So that's what happens in Quakerism, right? You get eldered. They come and say, you've got to stop what you're doing. Now, that is whatever it is. In the case of Mormonism, it's, of course, much more of an interference. We've just had this case of some Mormon writers, this guy Tweed of the, I guess it's Mormon Think, and you can follow this on Mormon Curtain, who was threatened with excommunication last weekend, and the threat of excommunication hangs over him. Even now, he may have an excommunication hearing at any time, because he revealed secrets of the temple ritual, the liturgy, the so-called endowment, and he also cast aspersions on Romney. So that's obviously a desire to chill such people, because lots of Mormons certainly can see through Romney, right? And this is something that is held together by various forms of repression and intimidation. It was like in the 1850s, right? The whole literature around the world that grew up around this idea of escape from Utah, right? To get out from under Brigham Young. And how could you do that? Before the railroad, it wasn't so easy. And they would come after you if you tried to get away. And we have those cases documented in the book. So antinomianism arises in Judaism with Sabbatai Zvi, Shabtai Zevi, Sabbatai Zevi or Shabtai Zvi, 1666. He comes in with the same thing. He tells the learned rabbis of Prague and other places, go wild because I'm the Messiah and everything is suspended, and I'm telling you. Bad idea, bad idea. We'll be back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Once again, it's the afternoon of Friday, October 5th, 2012, and we're announcing the imminent shipping of Just Too Weird, Bishop Romney's Mormon Takeover of America. And the relevance is when you see Romney in that debate lying with that kind of ease and seamless continuity, never missing a beat. You see, other people when they lie, they get verklempt, right? They get tied up because they know they're lying and they have all kinds of things going on, right? This is how lie detectors work. But it's very possible that on Romney a lie detector wouldn't work because there's no guilt, there's nothing. So where does he get this? Well, let's look at the relation of the Mormon Church to polygamy. Let's just pick a leading example. It's not exactly clear when Joseph Smith began with polygamy, right? He's thought to have racked up between 50 and 84 wives. Actually, the conservative institutional count is in the 30s, the moderate count is in the 50s, and the more extreme count is in the 80s. So Joseph Smith, sometime around 1830, started with polygamy, which was secret. And it was secret. It was his secret for a while, and then, of course, the evidence of his celestial attentions became impossible to conceal, as one writer puts it, and then it had to come out, but only in the small circle of the Mormon leadership. So for a lot of this time, it was a privilege of the elite, of the top dogs, of people like Parley P. Pratt, the great-great-grandfather of Mitt Romney. But let's say from 1830 or thereabouts until 1852. The Mormon rule was practice polygamy, do polygamy, live in polygamy, but deny it. And deny it indignantly. What? How dare you? What a slander. Us, polygamy? Never, never, never. So whatever you can think about tensions from lying, right? The bad feeling, bad conscience of lying in public about something that you've elevated to an article of faith, literally, because it's an article of faith, and was already then on the inside, that you can't get into heaven if you don't have more than one wife. So in 1852, it changes, and Brigham Young says, surprise, we've been practicing polygamy the whole time, 22 years, all those vehement denials, right? It's like Nixon, the Quaker antinomian, but Nixon can come out and say, or his spokesman can come out and say, all previous statements are inoperative. So that's what Brigham Young does in 1852. All previous statements are inoperative. We are polygamy. Polygamy is us. We've been doing it. We'll continue to do it. We have to do it. God told us to do it. Can't get into heaven without it. So if you want polygamy, come to me, come to Salt Lake City, and polygamy will be the order of the day. Now, this is not a matter of a demographic crisis, right? The story we get from Glenn Beck and the story we get from John Meacham here in the Time magazine cover story about the Mormons. We see here, let's see, the explanation is that they wanted to generate more people, more Mormons, so they had to turn to polygamy. This is a fallacy. The general rule in Mormondom is that there were more men than women. So the idea, there are already more men than women. If one man monopolizes 5, 10, 15, 20 women, that's going to create a permanent class of bachelors who are embittered because they have no way of getting into heaven. And you can see that again. You go to Colorado City, Arizona, or Hillsdale, Utah. The young men who don't make it to polygamy are kicked out. They're hounded. And that's what Warren Jeffs did, and that's what Brigham Young did at different times. Here's what John Meacham writes in Time magazine of this week. Moving westward, the church grew more pragmatic over time, seeking to make peace with the broader world, to preserve freedom for Mormons to live as they wished. Yeah, it's for some Mormons to live as they wished, not the young men, not women, and particularly not older women who were often dumped. Even polygamy, writes John Meacham, the most notorious of Mormon practices, was limited to practical concerns. Practical. It was because the church needed new members. And they back up Romney. As Romney told 60 Minutes in 2007, referring to his great-grandfather, Miles Romney, quote, they were trying to build a generation out there in the desert, and so he took additional wives as he was told to do. This is false. This is not true. The historical record does not back that up, because the polygamy started in the 1830s. There's pretty good evidence that the polygamy started before they were driven out of anywhere, right? When they were still in the Palmyra, Rochester, New York, burned over area, it started. Because as Joseph Smith said, whenever he saw a pretty woman, he had to pray for grace. So he did it as a matter of impulse. With Brigham Young, it's an organizational strategy. The idea is, I want you to come to Salt Lake City, meaning the desert, right? Meaning the wilderness. And once you get here, you're not going to like it, so I want to keep you here. And I want to offer you something that you will like, polygamy, and once you're polygamous, you have no other place to go. You can't start a polygamous family here and then go to San Francisco or Chicago or St. Louis or anywhere like this. You can't. You've got to stay here. So polygamy, the way Brigham Young saw it, was a way to bind people, to nail them down so they could not get out of this paradise of Deseret. So what are we left with? From 1830 to 1852, practice polygamy, deny it indignantly. From 1852 to 1890, practice it and proclaim it and demand, say, this is my constitutional right. You can't stop me. The First Amendment, freedom of religion, my religion says polygamy, therefore I get to practice it. Now, under Brigham Young, the religion also includes human sacrifice, right? Blood atonement. Blood atonement for the United States, above all. Blood atonement for people who are somehow linked to the killing of Joseph Smith and Hiram Smith. Human sacrifice. Now, somebody could say, human sacrifice, as Brigham Young did. Human sacrifice is part of my religion. You can't stop me. And here the question is posed, right? The religions come forward with competing absolute claims. And these, unfortunately, or whatever, because of the nature of human life, have got to be subjected to the rules of the civil magistrate. That religion is belief, but once it gets to overt acts, those overt acts have got to be classified and judged according to public law, not according to the internal belief system of anybody's religion. Other than, if you don't have that, you have civil war. You have chaos. You have the French Wars of Religion from about 1560 to the end of that century till almost 1600. You've got chaos going on. That's where the politique come forward, and that is where the principle that I've just developed comes from. So from 1852 to 1890, practice and proclaim and say that this is it's a constitutional right. And indeed, try to get admitted as a state so that you'll have even more ability to impose polygamy. However, the Moral Act of the Civil War period, 1862, bans polygamy, and it sets up this machinery similar to the RICO statute that says if organizations promote polygamy, they can be expropriated. Their property, their wealth, their riches can be taken away. So it's like RICO, right? The loot can be seized. Well, it took a while, right? The Poland Act. It took Supreme Court decisions that the ban on polygamy was legal and constitutional. In 1890, the Mormon Church is facing the expropriation of everything, and at that point, there's a new revelation that comes to the first president saying, okay, we're told now to drop polygamy, although we keep it for heaven. Drop it now, have it later in heaven. Back in a minute. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. We're reminding you of two things. October 27th, New York City, 56 Walker Street from noon to 6 p.m. The United Front Against Austerity will meet, convene, found, whatever you want to call it. We will be there, and you should be there too. If you didn't like that debate, if you're disgusted by the choice between a liar, Romney, and a coward, Obama, who's also a liar, but we've got to use the ruling passion, I guess. Every man in his humor, as Ben Johnson would say. They combine many of the deadlies, but you got to pick the big, the one that they like most at any given time. If you're disgusted by that choice, if you find that the choice between Romney and Obama is an insult to your intelligence and absolutely no future for the United States, be there in New York on October 27th, noon to 6, 56 Walker Street, Tribeca, right by Canal Street. There's a call up that I've put on my website, tarpley.net, and news about this will also come through Twitter feed, Webster G. Tarpley on Twitter, as it did. I live blogged the debate, right, calling attention to the cascade of lies, right, in the first 10 or 15 minutes by the antinomian Romney, the guy who says, I'm a saint, I'm a Latter-day Saint, moral law does not apply to me. He would be a bigger antinomian than Nixon, because with Nixon, the Quakers, of course, starting in the 1600s already, as I said before, clamped down. They said you got to cool it with the inner light and the inner voice, and you got to go with the sense of the meeting. Now, the problem is, as it shows with Nixon, is that these cultural tendencies run very deep. And in the case of Mormonism, since this is a compact, well-organized, sectarian cult, sect with a bitter narrative of persecution, right? Cahiers de doléances, gravamina, right? Their complaints. They have a liturgy of complaints, a gospel of complaints about what the United States did to them. This is much more heavily inculcated than it would be, say, in a modern Quaker or something like this. So just to wrap up on polygamy, from 1830 to 1852, practice polygamy in secret, especially at the upper levels, but deny it. 1852 to 1890, polygamy for everybody, not just the elite in the Mormon church, but for the poor farmers of southern Utah, right? The picture that we have is the farmer, the Mormon farmer, the polygamist is the overseer. He's got 5 or 6 wives. Those are the field hands. They do the work. The man directs the women. How about that? So that's how it became a mass phenomenon, and that's where it still exists today. In those areas of southern Utah where the Romney family also lived, because they went to St. George, Utah, to help Brigham Young build one of his pleasure palaces there, right? One of his multiple celled polygamous houses. So 1890, they were facing a decree. They were facing, court judgments based on the Moral Act that they were going to be expropriated if they continued to promote polygamy. So in 1890, the revelation came down, time to drop polygamy, at least on earth, right, in this life, apparently, except that did not end it. And we see that in the Romney family. They were in Mexico by that time, and they continued to contract the polygamous marriages. The technicality they used was this. The 1890 decree says, don't practice polygamy if it's against the law of the land, understood being where you are. So if you're in the United States and polygamy is banned, you got to stop it. But maybe you're someplace else, right? I don't know. Maybe you're in the Ottoman Empire. Who knows? There you can do it. So the idea was if you went to Mexico, this was not so much of an issue in Mexico. You could get by. I have to say I have not been able to learn too much about the way that the Mexican government handled the issue of polygamy. But the fact is, some Mormons went to Mexico. Others went to Canada. There's a community up there that started off as polygamous with Pratts and others coming from there. So that's the way in which polygamy continued. And remember, the Romneys had this polygamous colony, Colonia Juarez, Mexico, until about 1912 when Pancho Villa came through and drove them out. So we can then say from 1890 to about 1945, it's a phenomenon of practice it to some extent. Certain Mormons were practicing polygamy, but by now they're denying it. So 1830 to 1852, practice and deny. 1852 to 1890, practice and proclaim. 1890 to 1945, practice, although on a narrower basis and concealed, and deny it. And as I say, these marriages last a long time, and as far as I can see, the last head of the Mormon Church who had polygamous wives, he passed away in 1945. After 1945, what do we have? Well, this we don't know so much about. We know that there's the fundamentalist LDS down there with Warren Jeffs on the southern Utah to Arizona border, and they're practicing it, right? You find, look in my book, Just Too Weird, Bishop Romney's Mormon Takeover America. How'd you like to live in Colorado City, Arizona, where the mayor is a polygamist, the fire chief is a polygamist, the judges are polygamists, and the police chief is a polygamist? Not much chance. And that's where when Orrin Hatch goes down there campaigning, he said, oh, I know so many people in Hillsdale, Utah, the Twin City, across the border, and they share the police department in common with the Arizona ones. Orrin Hatch says, oh, I think some of the best people are polygamists. And big sis, Janet Napolitano from Arizona, of course. There's a big story about Janet Napolitano and people like this, who never lifted a finger against these polygamists, nor did Bruce Babbitt, who then went on to the Clinton cabinet, nor did Fife Symington. There's a whole story about governors of Arizona, right? There's a more open complicity in high places on the Arizona side than even on the Utah side. So you get the idea. Let's just take racism. It's another story. Can blacks be a member of the church? Now, the Book of Mormon has racist prejudice in it. but it's more that the Lamanites, anybody with brown or black skin, is descended from those evil angels that wouldn't support the Mormon Jesus in the struggle on the planet Kolob. But that doesn't necessarily rule you out if you're black. The way that changed then was the Book of Abraham, somewhat later, and that's where we get the argument that if you're descendant of Ham, I guess it is, who's black, then you can't be a priest. So this is thought to have been dictated by the expansion of the Mormon Church into the southern states and Joseph Smith's desire to recruit wealthy Southerners who might also be slaveholders. So they would object to coexisting in a congregation with black people. So it's another good example. It's a purely pragmatic change based on expediency, but it presents itself as being the eternal word of God. In other words, it doesn't say, hey, man, the heat is on, or we better drop polygamy, or we can recruit like mad in the South if we just go a little bit more racist than we are, right? Follow the path of white supremacy a little bit further. It's always presented as God talked to the first president last night, and this is now the eternal word. The problem with that is it's always changing. How can the metaphysical realities of the world be in such flux? And then 1978, we have a new revelation that you can be black and join the Mormon priesthood, but this is only, again, at that level of regulations. It doesn't change what's in the Book of Mormon and, above all, what's in the Book of Abraham. The Book of Abraham, of course, is this fraud, right, that Joseph Smith got a hold of an Egyptian burial document, and then he said he was translating. He couldn't translate it, and he made it into a whole big story, which has no relation to the embalming instructions, really, that are in the original document. All right, back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C. 2 important things you should do during the election campaign, during the time between now and the presidential election. First is prepare to attend the United Front Against Austerity, October 27th, New York City, 56 Walker Street, noon to 6. That will be a strategy meeting, discussion, program, organization, leadership, and everything else needed to provide an alternative. You watch that debate, the liar Romney, the coward Obama. This is no choice. This is absolutely unacceptable. It's time for an alternative to that at any level that we can get it. The other thing you should do, buy a copy, order a copy from Progressive Press of Just Too Weird, Bishop Romney's Mormon Takeover of America, Polygamy, Theocracy, and Subversion. And going on with a couple of other things about the contents of this, what we've discovered now, the pattern of the Mormon Church is radical changes in doctrine that are really not acknowledged or justified in any rational way, but always, a new revelation has popped up. But the new revelation always seems to look suspiciously pragmatic. And this is now the theme of this Time magazine cover story. The Mormon Identity, you've seen it. It's the Mormon Identity with what the equivalent of a stained glass window on the cover by John Meacham. And what do we find? The Mormon in Mitt. Romney's faith, Mormon faith, is central to his life and may be critical to any comeback. What the history of Mormonism tells us about his vision, values, and pragmatism. And pragmatism is their nice euphemism, their nice name for this question about flip-flopping, lying, dissembling, and all the rest. By John Meacham, The Mormon in Mitt. Now, the method here is sound. This is the right method. His faith is central to his life. The history of Mormonism tells us much about Romney's vision, values, and, if you want, pragmatism or unprincipled opportunism, I guess would be a better word. And in religion, the constant shifting of unprincipled opportunism is not good, right? Religion thrives obviously on tradition. So he's picked his tradition, and I'm sorry, it's the wrong tradition for the United States. The faith that he loves, the faith of his fathers, is not what we need because of these little problems, right? Polygamy, misogyny, racism, and subversion. Now, here's the thing. Meacham starts his article quoting, this is Time Magazine this week, Meacham's article, he quotes Marion G. Romney. Marion G. Romney, member of the Mormon elite, cousin of former Michigan Governor George Romney, and cousin, I don't know how many times removed, of Mitt Romney. And this is a sermon called America's Destiny. When you hear this kind of stuff, the Messianic utopian America's Destiny, this is where you want to watch out. Now, of course, the irony here is that the Mormons would have been saying at an earlier time, right, 100 years earlier, it would have been the destiny of those damned Gentiles, the destiny of those damned Americans. Now it's become hyper-patriotic, and this is another interesting pragmatic adaptation. So we're told, on the eve of America's bicentennial in 1976, that Marion Romney rose to speak at the biannual General Conference of the Saints in Salt Lake City. Can we maintain our basic freedoms, peace, and prosperity for another 200 years? The answer is yes, if we shall individually repent and conform to the laws of the God of this land, who is Jesus Christ. Now, the Bible for the Mormons is accepted, but any specific thing in the Bible can be dispensed with. In other words, the rule from Joseph Smith is the Bible is the word of God as long as it's translated correctly. Therefore, anything you don't like in the Bible, you say, wait a minute, that's corrupt. That's an interpolation, right? Some Jesuit put that in there, right? That's not authentic, and so forth. So then here's the thing, and I want you to remember George W. Bush. We have an interesting quote from George W. Bush in the paper this week. Let's see if I can quickly find it. Remember the kind of religious messianic stuff. Here it is, yesterday's Washington Post. Thursday, October 4th, Washington Post. Richard Cohen, and this is about the chances for war in the Middle East, but here's what George W. Bush, an antinomian of his own kind, told Jacques Chirac, president of France, in 2003. Here's Bush talking. This confrontation is willed by God, who wants us to use this conflict to erase his people's enemies before a new age begins, Bush told a bewildered French president, Jacques Chirac. For some reason, Chirac thought Bush sounded like a fanatic. Yeah, and he was a fanatic, and he couched it in religious terms. Now, we've seen this combination of a Christian fundamentalist, Bush, of limited mental powers, and a bunch of these wily neocons around him, leading him by the nose. Okay, and we've seen it even in Oliver Stone's movie about W. Now, what's the story? We have not a Christian this time, but a Mormon, Romney, with his messianic utopian vision, and another group of wily neocons, except this time the neocons have got a gripe. They've got an axe to grind. They say, oh, our faction has been slandered. We've been repudiated. Bush the Younger left with 22%. We've got to vindicate the honor of our neocon faction. And that's what's going to be coming at you through Romney. But here's the thing now. How might Romney go after this, right? You can see Bush is basically saying to destroy the enemies of Israel is the task of the United States. How would Romney see it? It's similar, but in some ways it's worse. The vision, and we're back to Meacham now in Time Magazine, the vision that greatly expands the traditional Protestant view of America as the new promised land. So overcorrecting for their earlier fanaticism against the United States, they now have, like other groups, right, the groups that didn't support the Union during the Civil War then had to overcompensate after that, right, at least in the northern states, the vision has now become more extreme with the Mormons than it even is with the American Protestants. According to Mormon founder Joseph Smith, the U.S. is the terrestrial home of the Garden of Eden and the place where a resurrected Jesus appeared to restore the gospel, and where he will come again in Jackson County, Missouri. Matthew Bowman, historian of Mormonism at Hampton-Sydney College, says, what is largely metaphorical for many Protestants is literal for many Mormons. Watch out. At Brigham Young University, Marion Romney, back in 1975-76, spoke of, and this is the heart of the matter, America's, quote, final great and glorious destiny. Here Zion is to be established and the New Jerusalem is to be built. From here the law of God shall go forth to all nations. Now look at that. From here the law of God shall go forth to all nations, says this cousin of George Romney and Mitt Romney. Now, if you compare that to Bush in 2003, the Mormon version is more extreme, because it's not simply, we'll destroy the leading Arab state, or we'll destroy the main threat that we can see to the Israelis. This is now, the law of God shall go forth to all nations. Now, where might that come from? Again, looking in my book, Just Too Weird, Bishop Romney's Mormon Takeover of the United States, Polygamy, Theocracy, and Subversion. It comes from the White Horse Prophecy of Joseph Smith, and we're going to look at that now in just a minute here on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley in Washington, D.C. So we're just looking at the current Time magazine cover story on the Mormon identity, Mitt Romney, and we're reading this chilling, I think really scary, prophecy by Marion Romney back in 1975, America's Final Destiny. This is going to be Zion and the New Jerusalem, okay, in Missouri. But from here the law of God shall go forth to all nations. This does not look so good. This looks more extreme. This is basically a declaration of war against every sovereign state. That's the equivalent of the caliphate, right? What Al-Qaeda does with the caliphate, this is the idea of a universal theocracy. In this case, it's a universal Mormon theocracy. Al-Qaeda goes for a universal Islamist, Salafist theocracy. Both are bad. We don't want it. This is not the point. And to say, we support the Constitution, but the law of God is going to prevail, sorry, that does not work, because your view of the law of God is not the next guy's version. And you've got the Book of Mormon, the other guy has some other book. This is the road that we must turn away from. And now, the White Horse Prophecy, because that's what underlies this, right? The main messianic utopian point of the Mormon Church is what's going to happen, and this is what Joseph Smith is telling these guys in 1843 and 1844. I'll just give you a quote from it. Quote, quoting from the White Horse Prophecy, Joseph Smith talking, the last great struggle that Zion, meaning the Mormon theocracy, will ever have to contend with will be when the whole of America will be made the Zion of God. That means no more earthly rule, but the dictatorship of Joseph Smith, vicar of Moroni on earth, or Kolob on earth. Those opposing will be called Gog and Magog, right? Revelation. The nations of the earth will be led by the Russian Tsar, and his power will be great, but all opposition will be overcome, and this land will be the Zion of our God. Amen. Joseph Smith. Whoa. That's this amazing remark by Romney. Russia is the main strategic foe of the United States. This is a recipe for the apocalypse. We don't want it. People think that they acquire merits in heaven by bringing on the end of the world. Guess again. So you get the idea. And these are only some examples of what we have in the book. I would call especially attention the idea that the Mormons were fostered, I don't know about exactly created, although it doesn't take long before the intelligence division of the British East India Company is there. The charismatic Pentecostalists of Edward Irving through Reverend Hewitt coming to meet Joseph Smith in 1835, and after that, the massive recruitment, the massive transfer of religious enthusiasts, adepts, in England and Scotland and Wales into the ranks of Mormondom. It's a church that was built on the foundation of recruiting in the British Isles. And this, I'm sorry, you cannot do without the permission and the support of the British elite. Otherwise, you would have had the church courts of the Episcopalian Anglican Church and even Methodists coming after you, as happened to a very, very limited extent. So take a look at the unpublished essay by Thomas Carlyle on the Mormons. This is not on the internet anywhere. This is from the Carlyle Studies Annual, 1995. Clyde de Reals is was the scholar, the principal scholar of Carlyle. Carlyle is a fascist or proto-fascist, and Carlyle celebrates Brigham Young, saying that's the prototype of what we need to get rid of democracy. We need theocratic, charismatic rulers like Brigham Young who can be dictatorial and work from a mass consensus. Remember, Carlyle, in the last days in the bunker in Berlin, Hitler and Goebbels were reading Carlyle's book on Frederick the Great, saying we're going to get the same miracle of the House of Hohenzollern that saved him is going to come and save us. You could say Thomas Carlyle, a long time after he died, prolonged the Second World War by several months and got lots and lots of people, hundreds of thousands of people killed. So that's the guy who tells you that Brigham Young is the great prototype. And didn't he become the prototype, right? Can we draw a line of development from Brigham Young to Mussolini and then further? We probably can. And take a look at this book. The fraternization of the Mormons with National Socialism is heavy duty. And you see this in the Deseret News of 1933. You see it in the Der Stern, the Star, which is the Mormon publication in Germany under the Nazis. Roman Catholics, mainline Protestants, and Mormons were generally the only ones that the Nazis left alone, at least very late into the day. Seventh-day Adventists were slammed from the very beginning because they would not go along with oaths and they wouldn't serve in the military. So all of these things and more, buy a copy, buy several copies, get one for the person that you want to educate, get one for the person that you want to shake their, whose blind devotion to Romney you wish to shake. ProgressivePress.com, and the book is Just Too Weird, Bishop Romney's Mormon Takeover of the United States. Now, getting back to the question of this debate, what I put out on the Twitter, which I stress again, the liar and the coward. So Romney comes in there, and with his antinomian flexibility and pragmatism, as John Meacham would say, he gets to change everything, right? I've been campaigning on a $5 trillion tax cut for the rich, but I don't have any $5 trillion tax cut for the rich. Now, at that point, the only possible way out is for Obama to say, you're a liar, stop lying. Stop flip-flopping, stop lying, stop fibbing, stop prevaricating, however you're going to say it. And then, to go after him, remember the points that are relevant on Romney? Well, we should remember them, right? The obvious one is the 47%. When Romney gets up there and says, I want to be the president of all the people, I'll never increase taxes on the middle class. Wait a minute, the 47%. And what does this show? How about Romney's overseas accounts in Luxembourg, Switzerland, the Cayman Islands, Bermuda, and other locations? He's got his own incorporated tax shelter in Bermuda. How about Bain Capital and their asset stripping, destroying lives, factories, and communities? How about your tax returns? How about outsourcing? How about sending the jobs to China? Obama punted on all of that. He's a coward. And why, we'll go through in a minute. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. So here we have Obama debating Gordon Gekko, except it's a Gordon Gekko who pretends that he's reformed and says, I'm not in the business of giving a $5 trillion tax cut to my rich friends. How would I do that? So Obama's pathetic showing is that he doesn't bring up the 47%, the accounts, the tax shelters, the tax dodging, the Bain capital asset stripping above all, the tax returns, the outsourcing of jobs to China, the whole question of economic globalization, and indeed the fact that you can't listen to anything Romney says because he's a flip-flopper and it changes. So where does that leave us? Why does Obama do this? Possible explanations. One is, and some of these are more charitable to Obama than others. One is that as a black candidate, he's been told that you can't appear to be angry black man under any circumstances. Therefore, you've got to just take it. It sounds like the advice given to Jackie Robinson when he first came into baseball with the Brooklyn Dodgers. The problem is the world has changed since then, right? Things have shifted, and I think we've come relatively far down that road. More to the point, Obama has also been told by his handlers that his electability depends on his likability, and he's got to be likable, because if he gets involved in fights, if he starts calling Romney on his lies, then he won't be likable anymore, and he'll lose these famous fussy independents, right? The 3 or 4% in the middle that they seem to be contending for, that seem to be the main force in U.S. politics. And then, of course, there's the idea that Obama is, as I've pointed out in 2 books, a Wall Street puppet, and he's got to try, if he can, to ingratiate himself with Wall Street as much as he can, so he can't be seen as somebody waging a struggle of any kind, right? Not on the 47%, not on Bain, not on asset stripping, not on hedge fund hyenas, leveraged buyouts, private equity, everything that Romney represents. So Obama's got to pull all of those punches, we're told. So there you have it. I mean, the main underlying thing is that Obama, his mental orientation, is that he's already oriented towards the dirty deal which he's going to make in December to sell out his own base. He's preparing to stab his own base in the back with these sellouts on Social Security and entitlements. And he did say in the course of this debate that he supports now the Simpson Bowles. Well, we don't want Simpson Bowles. Simpson is this elderly misanthrope, someone who hates humanity. He has a special hatred for retired people. He's a bubbling cauldron of hate, very, very nasty. And then Bowles, that was Clinton's guy. He's a Morgan Stanley zombie banker hedge fund hyena. We don't need a misanthrope and a hedge fund hyena to make economic policy. So this defines this terrible situation. And now, as I say, in the background, we've got the Crapo Commission working with Crapo, Chambliss, Coburn, Alexander, Warner, Durbin, Bennett, and Conrad. And then we're told that there are 4 more, that we're up to almost a dozen on the Crapo line. And the idea here is massive cuts in entitlements and symbolic nicks on some of these riches. In other words, the thing you've always got to keep in mind, we're talking the necessities of the poor, the amenities of the middle class, and the luxuries of the super rich. And what we're being told is that the grand bargain means cutting deeply into the necessities of the poor, and indeed cutting heavily into the amenities of the middle class, right? The occasional meal in a restaurant or a vacation or something like this. But the luxuries of the super rich will hardly be touched. It will be basically imperceptible. So the only way out of this is the united front against austerity. You've got to orient your thinking towards the creation of this united front. And that's October 27th, New York City, 56 Walker Street, Tribeca, near the Canal Street subway. And that will be, I think, an important moment. I urge people to get there. Now, there are also these third parties. Let me point out that there are some glimmers on the questions of economic program and related matters. This guy, Harold Meyerson, writes for the Washington Post. He's the left wing, the left extremity of the Washington Post. And he talks about two things in a column this week. Number one is the Wall Street sales tax. He says this is his proposal for what the debate should talk about. He said it should talk about the transaction tax, the financial transaction tax. Harold, let's call it the Wall Street sales tax so everybody can figure out what this means. And it's not going to be paid by people who buy and sell for their own little 401k account or something like this. But it's the Wall Street sales tax. So usefully, Harold Meyerson said that should be debated. And the other one he wants to have debated is Glass-Steagall. And we're all for Glass-Steagall, except we're not in favor of using Glass-Steagall as the leading edge of agitation because it is a process reform which does not immediately impact the existential problems of the masses in the way that a ban on foreclosures, an open-ended 99 weeks plus to infinity unemployment benefits would do, an increase in the availability of food stamps. In other words, those are the immediate things that can serve as the leading edge of agitation, and I will argue for that in at the United Front against austerity. So there's that. And then we also had the Green Party. Now, I'm not putting my hand in the fire for anybody, but if you look at the Green Party, here we have Jill Stein running for president, and we have Sherry Hunkala that we had on this broadcast a year ago when she was running for sheriff of Philadelphia. She had a mass traction demand. Her mass traction demand was, elect me sheriff of Philadelphia, and I will stop all foreclosures, because I won't carry them out. I will refuse to execute foreclosures. You put me in there, you won't be thrown out of your house no matter what. And unfortunately, the Democratic machine was powerful enough to simply snow that under with their demagogy. But now we have Jill Stein and Sherry Hunkala for vice president. And Jill Stein has called for the Wall Street sales tax. She also calls it a financial transfer tax, but she also calls it a sales tax for the financial community. Jill, Wall Street sales tax, Wall Street sales tax. Sherry, I hope also, Wall Street sales tax is the way to go. Now, Jill Stein has the Green New Deal. I can see what she's trying to get at, and anybody who says New Deal immediately gets sympathetic attention. The problem with that is the green part, and if you look at the debate, Romney can throw at Obama saying, you're not picking winners and losers, you're picking losers because you're putting this money into these green jobs, and this is a failure. It's a historical failure. Don't we want to learn something from the failure of this green job stuff in the Obama administration? Does that show us anything about the nature of the world, the nature of technology, the nature of the market, and so forth? What it shows you is that these technologies need to be heavily subsidized, even more heavily subsidized than they were by the Obama administration. They are still anti-economical. Why are we throwing money down this rat hole? We've got to use proven, track-tested methods of energy production and not worry about the green jobs. We'll talk a little bit about some other minor parties here, and then got to get to the Middle East in our last segment. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Romney has a 5-point plan, right? I have a 5-point plan. Romney has a 5-point plan. I have a 5-point plan for 30 million new jobs. Dylan Ratigan, as long as he lasted on MSNBC, had a plan for 30 million jobs, except he didn't. Romney has a 5-point economic program. Fracking, free trade sellouts, union busting, genocidal budget cuts, and tax cuts for the rich. That's Romney's recovery program. That's the Bain Capital program. All right, that will not do the job. Now let's look at the Syrian-Turkish situation. Spent some time on this. If you look at Tarpley.net, you'll see it was part of a discussion on PressTV towards the middle of the week with a participant in Berkeley from the Institute for Policy Studies, another participant from Lebanon who is the sort of anti-Syrian voice in this entire thing, and yours truly. And what we've had is this border incident where it does appear that the Syrian army, and I say this with some trepidation, but the Syrian army appears to have shot a couple of rounds by accident into southern Turkey, killed a couple of people. Turkey has fired back, and the Turkish parliament has approved a resolution calling for, or allowing, not calling for, but allowing, it's a passive resolution, calling for the government to be able to do what they need to do. In other words, they can shoot back again if they feel they need to. This is part of the Turkish constitutional setup. Let me say, we had yesterday evening here in Washington the farewell of the Kazakhstan ambassador. The Kazakhstan ambassador has served here in Washington. He's now on his way actually to Moscow. He has been promoted to foreign minister of Kazakhstan, and he will be joining President Nazarbayev of Kazakhstan in Moscow in the next day or two. Actually, tomorrow. I guess it's the 6th, Saturday, the 6th of October. And I sampled opinion at this farewell gathering. The gathering attended by Leon Panetta, by Congressman Dan Burton. They were all there. But asking the Kazakhstan military attaché, is there a big danger? There was a relatively calm response. Also, the Russian Federation military attaché, calm response on that. And then the Turkish ambassador. So the Turkish ambassador is attending the farewell for his Kazakhstan colleague. And again, I'm struck. And let me just sum it up first of all before I tell you in some detail what he said. The atmosphere of these people who are directly connected to the region, Kazakhstan obviously close to Turkey, Turkey a protagonist of this situation, seems calmer, much calmer, than the atmosphere in the Anglo-American media. In other words, I see the Anglo-American media hyping a confrontation which on the ground is not desired. It's not the goal of anybody. Now, I do think that Turkey has overreacted, but, well, here's what the Turkish ambassador said, that Turkey has received an apology from Moallem, the Syrian foreign minister. This apology was accepted. More reassurances were offered by Syria that it would not be repeated. So therefore, the representations from the Syrian side are generally considered to be satisfactory. Turkey is not interested in war. Any further Turkish response will be proportional, and the incident is now quieting down. Turkey is encouraged by strong support from the NATO allies and is also hoping for some declaration of support from the United Nations. So on the whole, this was not a bellicose mood that one could see. And people who would have been nervous, I think, otherwise, don't seem to be. So, again, I think that you're looking, for example, somebody like Ann Applebaum here in Thursday's October 4th Washington Post. Ann Applebaum is the wife of the Polish NATO foreign minister, right? Sikorsky, I think his name is, crossing all the red lines in Syria. So they want to blow this up and make this into a huge deal. I also asked the Turkish ambassador, have you entertained the possibility that the Free Syrian Army station, operating in Syria, provoked this by shooting into Turkey? Interesting response is, interesting question, and thank you for asking. So the idea is that they do entertain, I mean, they are aware of that possibility, but in this case, Syria seems to have said that it is a mistake by Syria, which they regret and which will not be repeated. And that's also what we have here. Lavrov in Moscow on Thursday saying the Syrian authorities told him, Syria to Russia now, says it was a tragic accident that would not happen again. And Lavrov said, why don't you go and state that officially, according to RIA Novosti. So this is, the whole incident is this place called Akçakale. It's on the Turkish-Syrian border. It's about halfway between the Tigris River in the east and the Mediterranean in the west. So naturally, we are working for peace, in particular, as friends of Turkey, which we are. We're urging them, and indeed warning, as I had occasion to mention several times, that Obama's promises are worthless. Don't believe whatever Obama tells you. It's deception. His method is deception. And the representations that Obama made to Turkey about how easy it would be to knock off Syria have turned out to be wrong, and I think willfully so. Now, one other interesting thing. We've got all that brouhaha about, we've got people trying to blame Obama personally for what happens at the Benghazi consulate. Hey, if you want to blame somebody, blame Hillary Clinton. That's her department. But apparently some people, you can guess who, we've been talking about, they want to blame Obama, right? All the people that are on the what can we say, that are in cahoots with the CIA Mormon Mafia, trying to get Romney elected. Here's what we see, though. In the Washington Post of today, contingency plans seem to fail at U.S. outpost. Michael Birnbaum, Washington Post of today. What we're told is that the security of the Benghazi consulate was in the hands of the 17th of February Martyrs Brigade. We're told that they had contract guards. We had Libyan guards hired by Blue Mountain, a British company. My God, watch out for that. Libyan guards hired by Blue Mountain, a British company under contract to the U.S. mission. We had 3 armed militia members, 4 unarmed guards, and a handful of U.S. military personnel. But the most shocking is that the emergency force that's supposed to come in and help is the 17th of February Martyrs Brigade. Now, you'll remember them. They are accused in the killing of General Yunus. They are supposedly people who support Hifter. Remember, Hifter was the guy who came from Northern Virginia near the CIA, was shipped over to become the commander of the new Libyan military forces, and he immediately got into a conflict with Yunus, who was somebody who had been there, had been part of the Gaddafi army, and that then ended when Yunus was assassinated. So look at this. This is, if not Al-Qaeda, we're getting pretty close. We're getting uncomfortably close. And this was done by the State Department. So the idea was that the 17th of February Martyrs Brigade was supposed to come in. They did not come in, and instead they put in a call to Rafala al-Sehati, another militia, was also asked to come in. So this is crazy now. How can you have U.S. diplomatic posts guarded by these militias, right? In particular, a militia that's implicated in the assassination of General Yunus. This is absolutely insane. And I don't know, it's hard to blame all of that on Obama. That's a State Department matter. Maybe Hillary Clinton should resign. Maybe that would be a good thing at this time. And, of course, Susan Rice, because of her misrepresentations. So we'll see you next week. Remember, October 27th in New York, and Just Too Weird, Bishop Romney's Mormon Takeover of America from ProgressivePress.com.